welcome back to Spain. Tonight is going to be a night of drive-by nightscaping. So unlike the other evening where I walked down quite a steep path down a cliffside to the rock shelf on the edge of the Mediterranean, tonight all of my locations are going to be within a couple of 100 feet of where I can take the car to. I've got 2-3 locations in mind tonight that we scouted out the last couple of days. Again, that scouting exercise has certainly been a very hot exercise at this time of year in Spain. The first composition isn't a coastal one, so it's actually, I'm on the road, a very sinuous road that goes from the town of Javier down to a little cove called Granada. It's a beautiful little road, quite precipitous down the sides. Are just behind the camera there. There's, you know, a pretty steep tumble down into nothingness, into sort of the undergrowth down there. But it is a beautiful road. But looking south from this road is the Milky Way, but it's also a valley. So I'm sort of in a forested valley. There are some villas dotted about, so there's a bit of light, unfortunately, that's going to spill into the image. And there are some mountains behind, which I'll try and get into the image as well. So fairly simple composition, bit of a change from the coastal compositions I've had so far. I'm shooting with the trusty Canon 6D, and initially I'm going to be doing this composition at 14mm with the Samyang 14mm. I'm going to start with my foregrounds just to allow the Milky Way a bit more time to get a little bit more vertical. It's not quite in the ideal place at the moment. And I think I'll be doing tracked exposures for the sky tonight. So I really want high quality Milky Way action. So let's get on with it. So there's actually, as you can probably see down there, a camping park up, and a lot of people have just arrived to set up some tents, and so they're shining torches around the landscape, which I'm sure is very helpful for them, but it really isn't very helpful for me. Perhaps if I explained to them what I was doing, they would just mess around in complete darkness. We'll see. Okay, so a bit of a change of plan for my first composition. I wasn't particularly happy with the one from the side of the road there. Once you get the valley and that sort of thing, it just felt a little bit flat on the back of the camera. So I've decided, as I'm shooting from the edge of the road, to use the road here as a leading line to the Milky Way. So not a quintessentially Spanish shot in any way, but will hopefully still be quite effective, and at least I think it tells the story of this evening's activities. So I'm currently doing 2-minute foreground exposures at ISO 800, f 2.8. Probably do a couple of those, stack those to reduce the noise. Hopefully we'll have a decent shot. Okay, so that's the foreground done. Let's get the tracker set up. Aligned without falling off this cliff. Do you know what? Oh, it's not far off. I'm actually not going to get right down to do this through the poloscope because I think I've just realised there's an ant's nest around here. I don't really fancy getting really low down, but bearing in mind I'm shooting with a 14mm, and that's probably better aligned with Polaris than I could do the other night when I couldn't even see Polaris. I think we'll call that done. Check it, the tracker works. Right. Okay. So, the other night doing 2-minute exposures, you can't see me there, can you? The other night doing 2-minute exposures seemed to work quite well, so I'll probably do 2-minute exposures again tonight. And it should be more forgiving because I am at 14mm, not at 24 that I was the other night. So, ISO 800, that's already in. Slightly nervous that my remote control might be running out of battery. Let's just check. Okay. Oh, I need to turn off long exposure noise reduction. Okay, we're focused. I think we just go for it. Okay, so while we're waiting for those 2-minute exposures, I thought it would be quite fun for us to have a bit of a stargazing lesson. Now, behind me, hopefully you can see the stars of the Plough, the Big Dipper. Should be reasonably familiar to you, sort of a bit of a saucepan-shaped constellation. Usually the first constellation people get to know in the Northern Hemisphere. Now I'm going to use this little piece of glass, which is an Alan Wallace case Starglow filter, and overlay it on the lens here. And hopefully you can see those stars really begin to stand out, the stars of the Big Dipper. So this sort of blurs the stars slightly, brings out some of the colour, and hopefully you can see that on the video. So we're going to find a couple of other constellations, some of my favourite constellations, to give you a bit of a tour of the night sky while we're waiting for these exposures to finish. Okay, so first of all, we're going to go from the stars of the Plough or the Big Dipper, and we're going to follow the 2 end stars of the saucepan, and we're going to follow those upwards. And the first bright star you come across there is the pole star, Polaris, and that's the constellation Ursa Minor, which is sort of a curvier, smaller, fainter version of the Plough. You can probably see that in the top of the screen there. And then if we keep going, we follow that line from those 2 end stars of the Plough through Polaris. Those 2 end stars of the Plough, by the way, are called the pointers, often because they point towards the pole star. So you go through Polaris and keep going roughly the same distance, and you can see, hopefully just above the brow of that hill there, a W-shaped constellation. And I'm going to put the Starglow filter on now, and that is the constellation of Cassiopeia. And Cassiopeia is definitely one of my favourite constellations. A beautiful, compact, bright constellation, very, very recognisable, and really pretty in photographs. In fact, the Starglow filter brings out a lovely sort of straw colour in some of the stars in it. Okay, so this one gets a little bit trickier because I'm looking right overhead in the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and that's quite hard to get to with the camera here. But the area of the sky you can see here is often referred to as the summer triangle, and it contains 3 bright stars, which are the star of Deneb in Cygnus, Vega in the constellation of Lyra and Altair in the constellation of Aquila. And I'm hoping if I put the star glow filter on here now, you'll get a real feel for which of those stars are. So sort of middle of the frame, just to the left of the middle of the frame, is Deneb in the constellation of Cygnus, and that's a cross-shaped constellation. In the screen here, it will be seen as a cross on its side, almost like a swan. Cygnus actually means swan in Latin, and this is a swan flying from the left to the right. So the left-hand bright star is the tail, and you can see the swan flying off to the right there. Just in the middle of the screen, towards the top, is the bright star of Vega in the constellation of Lyra, the lyre. And you can see a couple of bright stars just below that to the right as well. And then at the bottom right of the screen is Altair in the constellation of Aquila, flanked by two brighter stars there in Aquila as well. And those three stars combined form the summer triangle, and you can hopefully see in the screen here the Milky Way floods through the center of the constellation of Cygnus. That's the summer Milky Way, we call that in the northern hemisphere, and that's a beautifully rich part of the Milky Way, which contains a dark dust lane called the Great Rift, a beautiful part of the sky. It also contains the famous North America Nebula. Okay, final bit of today's lesson. You can see Altair and Aquila just there in the sort of middle upper left. Just to the upper left of that, so right towards the top left of the screen there, is the little constellation of Delphinus, the dolphin. And then just to the right of that, so on the sort of a third of the way from the left hand of the screen, right towards the top of the screen, is the constellation of Sagittarius, the arrow. And that's one of those constellations which really does look like what it's meant to look like. You can see that arrow shape there, with the point, or the head of the arrow, over on the left, and then the tail over on the right. But what I'm excited to show you here, which I could never do from the UK because it's far too low, is just above the horizon there is the constellation of Sagittarius, which is a beautiful constellation, often known as the teapot. And if I put the star glow filter in front of the lens, hopefully you can see there that little sort of teapot shape. And just to the right of the teapot, coming out of the spout, you can hopefully see that hazy patch. And that's known as the Sagittarius star cloud, and often, because Sagittarius is often regarded as a teapot-shaped constellation or asterism, that sort of puff of steam is coming directly out of the spout there. So it's quite a nice little way of remembering that part of the sky. If I tried to do this from the UK, it'd be pretty much impossible. Sagittarius never rises really sufficiently far from the UK to do any meaningful photography. Maybe from the south coast, directly over the sea, you can get some good images, but certainly from where I live in East Anglia, it's pretty much impossible. Okay, so while I've got the tracker polar aligned, I'm going to start doing some landscape shots at 14mm as well, at the same part of the sky, but I think some of the foregrounds that I've got in mind later on will probably work well with landscape orientation rather than portrait. So while I'm polar aligned, get it all done here. You can probably still hear and see behind me the campers down in that little campground there. It has cooled off quite a bit. I was a bit worried. In fact, you can hear their kettle. Can you hear that? They all seem to be having a nice time. They seem perfectly pleasant. It's just a shame that occasionally they shine torches up this way and it kind of interrupts the foregrounds that I was shooting earlier. But after this, I'm going to head down to the Granada Cove itself, and probably get some shots there at the beach and overlooking that beach as well. There's a nice overlook which I'm going to drive to as well. So I think I'll see you there shortly. Okay, so welcome to location number 2 for the evening. This is Granada Beach. It's a beautiful cliff surrounded cove, not that far from Javier on the Costa Blanca, and it really is a stunning location. It used to be quite easy to get down here, but over the last few years a lot of the access has been very heavily restricted, and I believe that's because it's got very, very popular. So sort of these locations that appear on Instagram and suddenly everyone is attracted to, very much honeypot locations, and it's a tiny place, and I think it just got completely overwhelmed. So thankfully at night it's a lot easier to get down here. No one's sunbathing, but as you can probably see in the bay behind me, or in the cove behind me, we've got a yacht that is anchored for the evening. There's a couple of people milling around on the beach, but otherwise it's a very beautiful, calm place to be. So the composition that I've got here, whilst I can't like to get the whole cove in the image, I think that's only going to be possible from above, from one of the lookouts up there. So I've got the southern edge of the cove in the foreground with this large mountain in front of me. The Milky Way is coming up straight behind it. I'm using a nice wide angle, so 14mm again, landscape orientation, and I'm doing the foreground at the moment, which is a 2-minute exposure at ISO 800. And I'll probably use a couple of dark frames for that as well. So let's check out the foreground. So that's looking pretty good. It would definitely be better if there wasn't so much light in the foreground. You can see in the top right hand of the screen there, there's a few villas up on the mountainside there, and also some behind us here, which actually have some pretty obnoxious lighting, which is sort of lighting up the side of this mountain here. It's kind of doing low level lighting for me. Personally, I'd rather if we didn't have that at all. Okay, so let's check out that 2-minute exposure. That's looking pretty good. It's a shame we've got the lights up on the mountainside up there, which are blowing out a little bit, unfortunately. There's some villas up there and lots of outside lights on those villas, which are causing some challenges from the highlights blowing out. But everything else looks nice and clean, nice and smooth. Composition's nice. Milky Way's in a nice position. Got the beach as a leading line here in the foreground, going from the bottom left-hand corner and arcing through to sort of the middle right third. It should be quite a nice image. Okay, next composition I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but it's basically looking straight out from the beach through the entrance to the cove, landscape orientation with the 14mm, so nice and wide, hopefully get some sort of sense of the scale of this place. There's a couple of yachts moored in the bay. Hopefully they'll come out as well and their lights won't blow out the highlights too much. Not quite sure what the sky's going to look like on this because it's slightly boring bit of sky that's behind. Earlier on this evening, straight after dusk, the Milky Way would have lined up nicely, but I wasn't down here in time, unfortunately. I could possibly drop in the Milky Way from earlier. It feels like cheating a little bit, so I might just see what I can get out of the foreground that's going to be there anyway. What I have just seen, unfortunately, is where there is a little bit of swell in the water further out. The boat on the right here is swaying from side to side with me, so I think rather than having nice crisp pinpoint lights at the top, I'm going to get this very little sort of yellowy arc instead, but not a lot I can do about the sea conditions. Okay, so that foreground ended up looking quite nice, and the stars, whilst they're not shouty above it, there's no Milky Way, there's no Orion, there's no particularly bright or exciting constellations. It actually looks quite nice out there. So I'm gonna now do a series of sky shots, and those sky shots are at 25-second exposure. I'm at ISO 4000 and f2.8, and I'll take about 15 of those and then stack them in Sequator to reduce the noise. So as you might have seen in my last video, my website is now up and running, www.paulhowarthnightscapes.com. And the reason I'm excited about having a website is it gives me the chance to show my work in exactly the way I intend it to be shown. So most of my images I share on social media, so Twitter, possibly Instagram, and astronomy specific forums like Stargazers Lounge, and the latter in particular is a great place to show astro work, and there are people who really take the time to understand the images that you're shooting. But I have often found with Twitter and with Instagram that they really lack the space and the context to give an image justice, and that all sounds quite pretentious, but the images that are on the website, I'm quite proud of. I've really enjoyed taking them, and there are stories that go with a lot of them as well, and so I've taken some time to write some of those stories down, particularly from before I had my YouTube channel, where I take people along to actually experience the stories firsthand. Those stories, I think, really help to bring the images alive, and if anything else, it's something for me as a keepsake of reminding me, taking me back to the particular spot where I was taking those images. A lot of them have been taken on holidays, so there's lots of memories tied up with them, but nearly all of them come with adventure attached, and so that's really exciting for me to look back and just remind myself of some of the great times that I've had under the stars. So I'd really appreciate if you check it out, leave a comment about what you think, constructive criticism, whatever you like, but it's there for a lot of my better shots to be seen. Okay, next drive-by composition. I've driven on the road that goes above Granada Beach where I was earlier. The road zigzags up kind of right above the cove, so you get a really nice vista of the cove from up here. You can see the whole thing. Again, I've got a bit of light blighting from some of the villas on the other side of the hill there, but the Milky Way lines up beautifully from here earlier in the evening, so that's why I took my landscape 14mm stack shots for precisely this location, and I think it's going to look quite good. Good to go. Probably hear a bit of music behind me. I'm finding a lot of these viewpoints that I've been at have been quite popular with other people, so there's people pulled up in cars just sitting, enjoying the cool of the evening and just the silence. I mean, they're ruining silence with the music on, but I guess it's still a nice place to be. Okay, so those foregrounds look good. I've already got the sky shots, so it's now on to the next location. Okay, so welcome to drive-by location number 4 of the evening. This is an overlook above a beach called Ambolo. The beach itself is closed at the moment because of dangers of rockfalls from some of the cliffs over to your right over there. And actually the road down here is shut most of the time as well, but there are a couple of villas further down the road here. So it is possible to get down here. During the day, it's blocked off entirely. There's a guard standing at the top of the road, but at night the guard isn't there. So I figured if it's okay for those guys to come down here, it's kind of okay for me to come down here. But it does feel a little bit sketchy. Interestingly, I can see a light down on the beach down there, so someone's obviously found their way down there. It is a beautiful beach. What's great about this beach is there is a small island just off the far side there, so that's the southern end of the beach, and that island kind of gives this beach a very covey-like feel. Earlier on in the evening, the Milky Way lined up beautifully down here. So again, the portrait 14mm track shots I was using earlier work with this composition very well indeed. I'm just going to take some foreground shots from here now, and then after that we'll head over to the final location of the evening. With the foreground here, you can probably tell behind me that you can see the pulse, the rotating pulse of a nearby lighthouse just dappling some of these cliffs. That actually makes the foreground quite difficult to get the settings right for, because parts will be a lot brighter than other parts. It's going to take quite a bit of editing, I suspect, to make the whole thing look natural, but it's probably quite a cool effect on the video camera. So let's get the 2-minute close set up on this for the foreground. Welcome to the 5th and final drive-by foreground location of the evening, at which I forgot to turn the microphone on for the first few clips This is Cap Negre, the Black Cape, perched high above the Mediterranean. A couple of foregrounds I looked at here. The first was through these beautiful fir trees at the Pleiades and Jupiter, rising over the Inky Sea to the east, and then a lovely outcrop created a nice lead-in line for the Cassiopeia region of the Milky Way in the northeast. Unfortunately, at this location, my Samyang 24mm gave up the ghost. Something has happened to the aperture blades that I need to look at, so all of my shots here were done with a 14mm. Okay, so I managed to have a bit of fun with that composition. That nice lead-in line from this rock formation was just crying out for a selfie at the end there, so put myself on the end of this rock headland, got a couple of selfies there. Right now I'm doing the sky shots, so 2-minute exposures, ISO 800, 14mm at f2.8. Really hoping I get some nice detail in what is a beautiful and frankly underrated part of the Milky Way. This lovely bit that flows from Cassiopeia down through Perseus and into sort of Taurus and off past wherever it goes, Orion as well. So hoping that because I'm using the Astro modified camera that I'll pick up the California nebula, which contrasts really beautifully with the blue hue of the Pleiades reflection nebulosity. So really hoping that comes out in this shot. It'll be quite small because I'm at 14mm and it's obviously quite a wide field of view, but hoping that comes out well. I'll probably do about 10 of these and then we'll call it a day. So thank you very much indeed for coming along tonight. It's been a really fun evening, lots of different locations, really relaxing, easy to get to in the car, no silly hiking to silly places, and got the tracker out a couple of times as well, which is definitely progress for me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Next time I'll almost certainly be back in the UK, probably not wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I have to say, whilst I was complaining about the heat the other day, this evening, right now, standing on this headland with the beautiful sea breeze, overlooking these little coves and these islands, it's really quite pleasant being outside like this. Again, I'm probably being eaten alive, but hopefully I'll get some good shots from all this. Next time you see me, bobble hat, coat, fleece, all that sort of stuff for a bit of autumn Milky Way action back in the UK. So thanks so much for watching and see you again soon.